Hello, I'm Dr. Sam Hancock of the Emerald Planet and Emerald Planet TV. We come to you on a week-to-week basis from Washington, D.C. in the United States as we look around the globe in 144 different nations, looking for those 1,000 best practices, the technology, services, and products that are making a difference as we move through the 21st century. And as we have a planet of 9 billion people by 2038 and possibly 12 to 13 billion by the end of this century, how are we going to be able to take care of all these people on planet Earth? And that's what Emerald Planet's all about. We come to you looking at the solutions, the best practices from around the globe as we create the Emerald Planet. Hello, welcome to the Emerald Planet. We're making a difference as we move through the 21st century. And seeing the long-term impacts of climate change. We're glad to have you. Thank you for being with us. Looking around the globe, we're looking at water and oxygen. Many people don't realize that in H2O, there are various levels of concentrated oxygen in the water. And over the last number of centuries, we've been losing more and more oxygen out of the water. And so not only do we need to create new water to take care of a population that's almost at 8 billion people on planet Earth, but also we need to make sure that there's sufficient oxygen in the water that takes care of all living beings. And we have someone that's actually doing that and has been doing it for some time. This is Dr. Luke Javernick. He is the executive director, also award-winning river scientist of River Science. Luke, welcome to the Emerald Planet TV.
Thanks, Sam. It's good to be here.
We're glad to have you. Tell us the origin of River Science.
Yeah, River Science started in 2016. I was doing my postdoc, doing research, and we do a lot of different tools and research that have some really unique approaches to making data more affordable and kind of getting more data. And that was where we started. We wanted to make river data affordable to everybody. And that's where we started. And that's where we wanted our name, River Science, because there really aren't other companies like this out there, and we just wanted to make it very clear of what we were and trying to achieve.
Okay, then also I want to say that you are a 501c3 nonprofit, which is very important to many of our listeners, both here and abroad. But looking at this image about the simplicity, but also the sophistication of the data and information that you're gathering and putting out through your citizen scientists, how do you mesh those two together?
Yeah, so this picture is some of my research in New Zealand during a PhD, and that's really where we started mapping out rivers in great detail using sophisticated equipment. And in the end, you're right, like you get these beautiful, simple maps that tell us a lot of information. And that's what we're looking at here is one of those techniques that we learned. And this data is available and very applicable to a lot of projects.
Now, looking at this type of sophistication, I was at LANEC in Lisbon, Portugal, and had a chance to see many of these types of laboratories. Very simple, but yet very sophisticated in the way that they mimic what's going on in nature. So why is it important not only to be outside, as what we see here, actually in the river itself, but also to be in a sequestered location and to recreate nature in order to come up with, again, the most elegant, but the most simplistic data and information that we need?
Yeah, so this is a laboratory, a hydraulics laboratory in Italy. And that's me next to the flume, as we call it. It really is just kind of a big toy river, but in the end, it can mimic a lot of really important processes. And we use some really highly advanced mapping techniques here where we could monitor and measure exactly how rivers changed under different conditions, which, to your point, is something that would be really difficult to do in the field. Having it in this laboratory and scaling it down opens up a lot of opportunities to ask and answer specific questions, and that's kind of the balance I think you're talking about.
Right.
Is you need field data and laboratories to kind of get to these underlying processes.
Mm-hmm. Very important. Looking at it as far as the demonstrations, and again looking at nature, but also from the laboratory. There's many ways that you go about this. What are some of the things that you're talking about right here in this image?
Yeah, so this kind of back to the laboratory, this is where a lot of these techniques were refined. But we do a lot of mapping for river projects and restoration projects, where every project kind of starts with a detailed elevation map that you have to understand the ground conditions, and then to design and construct on it, or even to monitor how things are changing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what this is showing. Is on the left there you have kind of the aerial, just the normal picture, and then on the middle of that black and white you've got all of the elevation difference of trees and houses.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third kind of gray image there removes all of those trees and buildings so that you just see the bare earth. And that's
Mm-hmm.
what's used a lot in river projects, to go through and actually understand the conditions, and then figure out what's happening, and also to design improvements on top of that.
Right.
And this is one of the technologies. So this is just a different view of it. This is the end product is called a digital elevation model, or DEM. And you can kind of see there the colors. The red is higher elevations, the yellows and greens are lower elevations. And in there you can really see like where ridges are and buildings, and you can see the river channels very clearly in there. And that's always, having this kind of data available is really important in our industry.
Now, looking at the drones, this is something that's being used globally. Many different configurations, many different styles. You can see this is outfitted with the camera and video camera. Why are drones so important in today's scientific research, but specifically as it relates to water?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, it kind of goes back to data being expensive, and drones are very cost effective, and you can go out and immediately get the data that you're looking for, if you know how to fly them properly and collect data properly with them. But it's one of the great revolutions in our industry, is the ability to go out and quickly capture the data we need, and to do it cost effectively, and drones are a great tool for that.
And the whole thing about having the drone too, it keeps from having the danger to the humans that may have to go into areas that are inhospitable to human life, and at the same time be able to fly low and to collect that data and the image. And I assume this directly relates to the drone.
Yeah, so this is a video, if it plays. It shows how we use the drone in the field to go out and collect these full maps, these beautiful 3D elevation models. And this kind of shows the beginning here, where it initially starts to build together the points. And then it shows the individual camera images with the blue rectangles. And then eventually this video shows the full 3D rendering of this creek. And this is, it's really beautiful and interesting, but at the same time, there's a lot of ways that we process this data out to do our work, and it's extremely cost effective compared to other solutions.
Right. Now, this is very interesting as far as water quality. Tell us what we're looking at here, because we're looking at different low-cost implements that are used to do the analysis that you need on the water quality, and also the quantity of it as well. So what is this machine all about?
So in addition to a lot of the mapping and elevation surveys that we do, water quality is a challenging field, because one, water quality data is really expensive, because you have people going out into the field collecting it, which is expensive. The travel is expensive. Sometimes you have to take samples and send it to a laboratory to have analyzed. That's expensive. And all of that expense makes it to where you can't get data very frequently.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've built our own water quality instruments, like this one shown. This is one of our, I think this is version 2 prototype here. It's got 6 sensors, solar, and then it has GPS as well. And so the whole idea is to be able to make this data affordable so that we can get more data and start to see how these river environments are changing over time. Yeah.
And one of the interesting things about this urban to remote locations, this is something very important because more and more of the Earth's population is becoming concentrated in the cities. And in many countries, the rural areas are literally being left behind, but yet the cities can't survive without the rural areas. So the fact that you're ahead of this as far as having the types of techniques and technologies where you can find out what's actually going on in these very remote rural areas and then what may be coming next for the urban areas, I find very interesting, Luke. And thank you for sharing this with us. Tell us what this gadget's doing here.
This is just another one of those units that's actually out in the field collecting water quality data on this little stream before it goes into the Arkansas River down there. And it's sending out data to the cloud every 15 minutes of these different water quality parameters. And just to what you're talking about, we're monitoring these smaller systems before they get into the bigger ones so we can kind of pinpoint where problems start to occur and when. And then we can backtrack and figure out with more of these sensors out where the problem started.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Now, looking at this is a very sophisticated system we have here. We're making it simplistic. But how is this actually working, and why is this data so important?
Yeah, so this is just a good example of kind of how our technologies are a little bit different. So for that mapping, we go out and we use drones and some land survey. And the other technology that's widely used, and it's good data as well, but it's called LiDAR, and it goes out and uses larger aircraft and lasers that scan the ground. And that's just a point to kind of make between ours is, this data has a lot of overhead. Big airplanes, the lasers can cost millions of dollars. And I just wanted to highlight how we're different and why some of our stuff, when I say cost effective, it's why, and it's just a lot to do with the overhead. Now, just quickly, sometimes LiDAR is the much better way to go because with a big plane, you can fly big distances. And so there's that sweet spot of where we're more affordable and where LiDAR becomes more affordable, just to be clear.
It just goes to show that we need to have as much sophistication and equipment as possible to do whatever is needed. I really like this image, and we're just about running out of time. But why is it so important that you have to really sometimes just be there and to be in the middle of nature to really know what's going on?
Yeah, so technology can't do everything right now. This is 2 people out in the field collecting water quality samples and getting ready to do some chemistry and then probably send it off to a lab. And it's just, technology isn't quite there for everything, particularly metals, and that's still needed.
Looking at it, we have about 30 seconds left and we have to be quick. What do you see for the expansion for the next 5, 10, or 15 years of this very simplistic way of getting very sophisticated data and information?
Yeah, there's just so much technology coming out, and everything's getting better and the cost is coming down, and we're just going to get to a point where we can have more and more data. We just need to be able to use that data effectively, and that's where we're trying to be in river science, is trying to make sure that we're helping other organizations along to understand and use this to the best ability.
That's absolutely fantastic. This is Dr. Luke Javernick. He's Executive Director, award-winning river scientist of River Science. Thank you for being with us as we create the Emerald Planet.
Thanks, Sam.
As we're talking about water and oxygen and the importance for not only humans, but all living beings on planet Earth, it's something we have to be very cognizant of and be truly aware about as far as this balance of oxygen, water, and its availability across the entire planet. And as we go to a planet of 9 billion people, they estimate now by 2038, is that we even need to be more aware of the quality of the water and also the oxygen therein. And we have a gentleman that's been doing research literally all across the globe in very different and difficult places. This is Dr. Luke Javernick. He is the executive director and is also an award-winning river scientist of river science. And Luke, welcome to the EmeraldPlanet TV.
Thanks, Sam. It's good to be here with you.
Tell us a little bit about this award-winning river scientist. I was very impressed with your bio to read that, and I just couldn't resist having a question about it. So tell us about the award and why are these awards really so important to the work that you're doing?
Yeah, the main award there is the Murray Curie Fellowship Award. It's the European Union's one of their most sought after fellowships, and it brings in researchers from around the world to do really cutting edge research in Europe. And it's a fantastic opportunity for researchers to propose their research, pick their university, and just put together a stellar team to pursue these projects.
Yeah, I think what you're doing is fantastic. Now, we're talking about citizen science and river data, and we have these 4 logos here, and you want to give a little special recognition to each one. So here they are. Just tell us very quickly about each of these and why they are so important to the work that you're doing at River Science.
Yeah, so all of these are good partnerships that we have at River Science. The top left is Colorado Parks and Wildlife. We're partners with them to run Colorado River Watch, which is the second logo on the top. And these are citizen science. We call it community science now. Same meaning, but just a bit more inclusive of a term. So if I say community science, that's what I mean. And then the CC down there is the Canyon City High School, which we get a lot of students helping out doing a lot of this community science. And then Anna Branch Solutions is a river restoration firm that we're colleagues with, and we partner up on several things and affiliates and different projects.
Right. I think that's very important to have these collaborations. Talking about these students, why is it so important, Luke, to start even down in the middle school, but definitely high school, to get these students involved, and what are they learning? What life skills are they gaining that's going to carry forward into the future?
Yeah, targeting younger and younger kids to get them interested in science is a great approach. A lot of schools now are kind of doing pathways where these students pick some kind of scientific pathway or arts or others, and they get them kind of tuned into what their interests are earlier. And that hopefully is successful as they go up through high school and they become more engaged with their education. And that's what this program is really good for, Colorado River Watch, is that we get the kids out and actively doing. So it's not just, we're not just teaching knowledge, but we're teaching skill sets, and these kids getting out and doing things and seeing things, and that their data is meaningful, it's empowering to these students.
Yeah. And also it's an aptitude and attitude both that's so important. Looking at these sophisticated maps, what does this actually tell us, but also tell the citizen scientists about their environment and where they are and why the work they're doing, it may be in a microcosm, but yet it's still so critically important?
Yeah, so this map here shows where a lot of the different data is coming in across Colorado from these 90 different volunteer groups of Colorado River Watch. And yeah, these groups are kind of isolated in their own river, but collectively they're helping us monitor the river health across our state. And we've been doing this now, River Watch has been doing this now for 30 years. They've sampled over 60,000 collections, over 500 different streams, creeks, and rivers in Colorado. And it's building this wonderful history and knowledge of our river's health. And then it's helping us keep tabs on when we have issues.
Got it. Now, being upfront and personal, I mean, you can't get any more upfront and personal than this. And they're helping each other. They're very much attuned to what's going on in front of them and taking these samples. How do you think this really translates into when they go home, they're talking with their elders, whoever that may be, and how that may be translating from your citizen scientists out into the greater community?
Yeah, that's a great thing to touch on. First, I'll just say this is up close and personal here, and this picture's pre-COVID days, and hopefully we'll get kids out to not have to social distance so much, but all in good time. But that's a great question about transferring this knowledge. These kids go out, they get really passionate, they see the changes in their river, and they really buy in and care about their own river and their community. But a lot of the conversations happen around the dinner table when people are listening, and they ask their kids what they're learning in school. And when they go home and they talk about this project and how they're out and doing something and the importance of water quality and the importance of our rivers, that's when we're educating beyond the students. And actually, people listen to their kids more so than other adults. And it's a great way to spread knowledge. Mm-hmm. And of course, these kids go on and grow up and become citizens in our community, and having them have a special place in their heart for river health and stewardship is a huge move for the future.
Yeah. I was raised like this, and actually the river running through the middle of my ranch, not quite as big as this, but almost the same look and feel. And I can, you're here talking about this. I'm looking at this photograph. I can go back to when I'm 5, 6, 7, 8 years old and have these same sensations out there standing in the middle of the North Fork of the Roanoke River and doing a similar kind of thing on my own. Looking at taking these samples back into the laboratory, why is this laboratory research so important?
Yeah, so it's great for the kids and the volunteer groups. They take this data and go back, and they do quite a bit of their own chemistry, which they have a lot of training on, and I can talk about that later. But so these students are doing titrations for different water quality parameters, and they'll do this several times a year. Some of the samples kind of go off to the lab as well, where we have professionals that are highly trained chemists run the laboratory experiments. But this image really shows that these kids are doing real science, and that's a big our big motto for Colorado River Watch is real people doing real science for a real purpose. And these kids are running great skill sets.
That's absolutely fantastic. Now, looking at this, what are we looking at here as far as all these samples, and why take so many samples? Won't 2 or 3 or 4 do?
Yeah, well, each sample kind of needs its own how you preserve it, and then how it gets to the lab and how it's processed. And then we'll do different samples throughout the year. We mostly are going to sample basic parameters of the river, like dissolved oxygen and pH, and that's what kids will do back in their school with the proper equipment. But this goes to the lab, where they'll run metal analysis, and then different times a year they'll also run nutrient analysis. And this is one of the pictures from the Fort Collins Water Quality Lab that we run in partnership with Parks and Wildlife.
That's fantastic. This is more equipment, and we're really focused on technology in the EmeraldPlanet TV. So quickly, what are we looking at here, and why directly related to water and, as you just mentioned earlier, dissolved oxygen?
Yeah, so this is one of the main pieces of equipment that we have in the lab. This is the ICP, which actually will do the metal analysis. And we also have a latchet that does the nutrients, I believe. And this is all part of how we make this science and this data affordable. By having, like I was saying earlier, that water quality data, having this community science is a real benefit because the students gain so much of it, but the state really benefits too, because water quality data is very expensive. Running labs is expensive. Having people go out and collect is expensive. But this beautiful partnership between the volunteers and the Parks and Wildlife makes this affordable and having these volunteers makes it scalable to where we can actually get out and get the data that we need across the state.
Yeah, because you were talking about the many different streams and rivers, creeks that you have. That makes it a really tough proposition to go everywhere. More about the technology and the data?
Yeah, this is just different pictures of some of the laboratory equipment that we have in the Fort Collins office. And it's interesting because this is used in part by Riverwatch that does the community science, but this equipment actually gets used by Parks and Wildlife research teams as well. So, one of the things that we try to really push is that we try to message that this is real people doing real science for a real purpose. And the protocols that training goes through for these volunteer groups, how the data is handled in the field, and then how it's handled in the lab are really high standards, and the rigor that goes on, because we want this data to be used and we want it to be respected. And it is. Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment uses this data, and the EPA uses this data as well.
Yeah, that's absolutely fantastic. Now, this is really a fantastic photograph. You see all ages, great diversity here. Why is this diversity in having this mix of ages and wisdom and experience so important to the work that you're doing at River Science?
Yeah, it comes back to creating those stewards. Some of the adults in here are teachers that go back and teach it to their schools and lead these programs. Some of these are the students that also become certified in our training. So this picture is one of our training events where typically they run for 4 days. They're very intensive. You're learning all about the chemistry, all about the protocols, and then the last day you'll actually be tested. And if you pass, you get a certificate, and then you go off back to your hometown and you're sampling the river that you care about. Mm-hmm. And then with the training, we also do quality assurance and quality control, where we'll test the volunteers' knowledge against samples that we know. So once a year, they don't know when, but we actually test them to make sure they're within the right parameters. And that helps us keep our data valid to the EPA and everybody. It's one of our big QA/QCs, but the training's phenomenal, and it's intense, but a lot of people come back year after year because it's a lot of fun as well.
That's fantastic. This is Dr. Luke Javernick, Executive Director, River Science. Thank you for being with us as we create the Emerald Planet.
Thanks, Sam.
In order for nature to take care of us as human beings, also all the plants and the biome and everything that are around us, we need to take care of the water and the oxygen. And there's a gentleman that's with us. This is Dr. Luke Javernick. He is the Executive Director. Also, he's award-winning river scientist of River Science. And we're going to be talking about the state of river restoration. And so, Luke, looking at the term restoration, why do we need to have restoration of our rivers, our creeks, our streams, everybody, body of water on planet Earth? Why is this restoration so important?
Yeah, that's a good question. If we think about our own local community, we probably have a creek or a river or some kind of body of water nearby. And we often don't think of that water being polluted, but statistics in the US kind of show that about 40% of the rivers that are surveyed are degraded in some kind of way. And a lot of these 40% are too polluted to fish in or recreationally swim in. And I think that kind of highlights some of the big problems that we focus on in the United States.
Mm-hmm. And this picture we have in front of us, Luke, tell us what we're really looking at as a true scientist that we humans may be missing. We see a little green area, this tiny stream running down and out of these foothills, and everything else around it is barren. What's right? What's wrong about what we're looking at?
Yeah, so this photo gets credit from Mark Beardsley, and this is a river here in Colorado, or a creek, that's had historically a lot of unmanaged grazing, water extraction, and over time the land is very bare down by the river. There's really no trees or substantial vegetation, and this river is starting to become degraded on kind of the biological aspect, the chemical aspect, and as well the physical aspects. And that's what we're looking at restoring when it comes to rivers. There's a lot of ways that people talk about restoration, but it's really the physical, chemical, and biological aspects that we're trying to get back to where they should be.
Yeah, looks like one of my first 4-H projects when I was 8, 9 years old. We had some of this on a property my father bought, and he started restoring all these areas. So looking at the erosion here in this situation, how is this actually degrading the water, but also the soil and the air? And what do we really need to do to improve this?
Yeah, so this is a good example of what we call incision, where the river keeps cutting down deeper and deeper, and that causes a few problems. Erosion, as you mentioned, it's pulling in too much sediment into the river, this creek, and then eventually the river downstream.
Mm-hmm.
And that's tough for the biological aspect of it. Sediment, too much sediment, like too much of anything, can become a pollution. But also, as this channel incisors deeper and deeper, it's kind of cutting deeper and deeper into that water table, and it's allowing the stored water to escape quicker. And so it's, as the riverbed's lowering, so too is the water table, which is another big problem that we face with a lot of our smaller creeks in the United States.
Yeah, and it looks like some of those mining areas that you have all across Colorado. I understand there's literally just tens of thousands of these incisions, in the mountains and throughout the state. So how does that degrade the creeks, streams, or rivers in Colorado? And this is what you're really addressing through your citizen scientists to test and learn more about this.
Yeah. So this one really is kind of looking at the water quality, kind of the chemistry here, but they're all tied together, right? This is actually, it looks like it's caused by mine, and certainly a lot of mine areas can have water discharges like this. This one, interestingly though, is actually from a post-fire, so where the watershed above caught on fire, burned really intensely, and now a lot of the sediment is being easily transported downstream in such great quantities that it's having that chemical component, physical and biological impacts as well.
Yeah, and this is what we're seeing across the West, where many of these areas, like in California, we see the incessant fires, but we don't really realize the aftermath of that. The topsoil, even the lower strata of the soil, is being washed away and leaving virtually no nutrients whatsoever to carry on life. But looking at the restoration point, I thought this was very well done in the photography that you shared with us. So we have 2008, 2016. Why are these two dates so important, and this gap in these dates?
Yeah, this is just, as we're talking about restoration, I thought it'd be great to, in the early part of this show, is just to kind of show what we're talking about and what we can do with restoration. So this, again, photo credit to Mark Beardsley. On the left there in 2008, this is the creek, very barren. Maybe the channel's a little bit, it's got too much sediment transport. The banks aren't really establishing good environments. And then in 2016, this is what it looks like after some significant restoration and helping the river have the processes that it needs to help restore itself with a little bit of encouragement and management.
Yeah, and the whole thing about it is allow nature to be able to care for itself. But when you have this kind of harsh and dramatic impact on the environment, it's very difficult for it to rejuvenate, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's kind of what we're fighting is a lot of human impacts. Throughout the different generations, we've had a different ideas of what river improvement really is. This is a picture from the 1900s in the Pacific Northwest where logging was paying about 55% of people's paychecks. And they'd go out and harvest the logs. And a lot of river improvement in this time was to actually go through the rivers and pull out anything where logs would be snagged on because they want the river to carry it down to the milling. And yeah, 1900s, this was our idea of river improvement, was to make rivers flow better so that we could get logs down.
Mm-hmm. Make them flow better so we can pull them back up, right?
Yeah. This picture is waiting for a flood to wash them down.
Oh my gosh! Now, then it goes to early days of electricity and damming so many rivers. How does this help to degrade? And is there any way that such structures actually improve the flow of the rivers, or is this purely a destructive process?
Yeah, it's a slippery slope on both sides. But yeah, in the 1930s, we wanted to quickly expand in America. We had all the right recipes, and the industrial age was happening, and we wanted power, and we wanted more water resources and fire protection, and that's why in the 30s, just dams were built everywhere. Today we have somewhere around 84,000 dams in the U.S. And yes, they provide a lot of wonderful things for our society, but there is a cost. They trap sediment, they change the water temperature, so downstream you have impacts to the biology, and they only have a certain amount of lifetimes as well, right? They'll eventually trap and store a lot of sediment and they lose capacity, so there's a maintenance issue as well. But for better and for worse, we have a lot of dams, and it just kind of highlights some of our thinking and how it's changed over time.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. And then looking at these various channels, this is something about the Army Corps of Engineers, any kind of water bodies, they're trying to make them straight runs, and you see the concrete. What have we done to the quality of the water coming through this, what probably was a natural and wild stream at one time?
Yeah, at one time it was. And then in the 1950s, you have the Army Corps of Engineers and a lot of flood districts as well. And, hindsight's 2020, right? Like we can clearly see why this is wrong today. But back then we can't really blame them necessarily. Their goal was to get water through these cities and this infrastructure as quickly as it could so that during flood events, which they were experiencing a lot of, weren't as devastating to their infrastructure. But to the quality that you ask, you've removed any transfer of water down to the water table here. You don't have any sediment. And that microbiology and the vegetation that typically lines rivers helps water to stay clean. There's a sustainable chemistry that happens there where the bugs and the fish and the plants process the nutrients of the water and chemicals, and you've lost all of that, and you've lost all the habitat here.
Mm-hmm. Now, going to filtration, this looks like a very destructive process in itself. But is there something we don't know about, we're not seeing to our eye, of how we may be actually improving the flow of water and restoring back to what was there originally?
Yeah, so this picture is kind of trying to tell the story of what happened in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, early 2000s, where we said we can do better. Let's get out and put rivers back the way they're supposed to be. And so we did so with a lot of construction. We treated this like a lot of other engineering projects where it was design, build, construct, and leave. And that's really not a very good approach to how we restore rivers. But this is just to highlight that this wasn't a sustainable approach either to restoring rivers, because it's really expensive. You're only going to impact a small area, and in the end, us telling a river how to be a river wasn't the best way forward.
Yeah, it's kind of a fool's paradise where humans trying to dictate the nature. Nature had this figured out a long time ago, so we're the neophytes as far as the world is concerned. Looking at this manual, and we're going to go out on this because we're just about out of time, Luke. Tell us what's in here that we need to know about, and how can citizens learn about really taking care of whatever the water body is around their own home.
Yeah, so a new approach to river restoration is really helping the river to restore itself through encouraging some of those natural processes, helping it kick off. And this is just kind of where we are today with restoration. And I present this design manual because it's really gaining a lot of traction for a lot of reasons. This work to restore rivers is mostly done by handwork. We're encouraging rivers to kick off their processes again, to be messy, complex systems, and it's not overly technical. It's in the title, low tech. So a lot of people with some training can get out and make a difference in their local rivers, and this is kind of it's scalable and it's affordable, and that's what we're going to need to overcome these river problems and the spatial scale of problems that we have in America and the world.
Luke Javernick, Executive Director, River Science, thank you for being with us as we create the Emerald Planet.
Thanks, Sam.
Looking at river science and making sure that we go into the future generations, we're going to be talking about high school education in action and why it's so important to have the students to be involved while they're still in school, before they graduate, even before they go off to the university, even if they're going to be in environmental science or even other hard sciences. Why is it so important to have them involved? Dr. Luke Javernick is the executive director. Also, he's an award-winning river scientist of river science. And we're going to be talking about getting students involved and allowing them to contribute to the science both of today and the future. Welcome, Luke.
Thanks, Sam. It's good to be here.
We're glad to have you. River science and high schools, how do these two mix together in your world very nicely?
Yeah, and in my world, in river science, we're trying to make data affordable. And kids in high school need education. And education in the past has really just been about giving kids knowledge, but we want to prepare kids for a better future and to give them skill sets and experiences. So one of our big things with the nonprofit is that we're really trying to get kids and education into action and going out into their local community and helping solve some of our greatest water resource problems.
Yeah, and I think it's important that you have them. And this is really a great photograph showing how, and you see the intensity that these young students, many of these that probably would rather be somewhere else, but yet because of their actually touching and becoming engaged in this, they realize this is something that's very important and important for their future. So how are you bridging this? Is this experience they're having right here that intellectual, but also that physical bridge between theory and knowledge, between theory and the real life of these students?
Yeah, so this is a stream table, and it's just a little toy river, but it does a lot of the typical physical processes of rivers, and getting kids to see that is how we first give them the concepts of what's happening. And then we get them out into the field and we show them other systems and how they work. And this does help bridge that gap between taking such a complex subject like how rivers move over time and how the social and economic pests like agriculture and others, how these come head to head in our natural systems. And but absolutely, this is the bridge that we make to help kids grab the concepts and then go out and apply them and understand them at a much deeper level.
Right. Very important. Getting out, going from, in essence, a setup classroom, if you will, out to the real out of doors. And so once they get out there, what are they learning beyond what you've just shared with them, either in the classroom or with the diorama?
Yeah, so we get them out and we get them collecting real data. This picture shows kids out in the Arkansas River where they've done bug counts. Essentially, you take this net and you screen the bottom, and then you go through and you pick out which bugs there are. And the bugs are really important because the absence and presence of certain bugs tells you a lot about the overall health of the river, because bugs are out there all the time. So it's not just how the water quality is right now, but it's how has it been over months and maybe even a year. So getting kids out and seeing this and participating in this is a huge transition. This data was collected as part of a way to help our community, because upstream there was a wildfire, and then all of those wildfire impacts really degrade our rivers. And getting the kids out and collecting these bugs upstream of where the fire impacts were and then downstream was really valuable for us river scientists to understand, but it really showed the bigger picture of river health to the students as well, of what impacts fire has and how sensitive these ecosystems are.
Now, looking at the testing kits, I know this is something that's very important. And also, even though it's simplistic, yet it's quite sophisticated. So, why do they need to learn about the testing and the various methods and the processes that are used for testing?
Yeah, because it comes down to standards, we want to make sure that they understand and that they follow these rigorous steps, because data has to be handled carefully and collected carefully. And this is water quality kits that they use with chemistry sets to actually quantify the water quality that's current in the river. So they take this data and the bug data and they build out this picture of the overall river health. But it really, to your question, it really comes down that having these kids do the chemistry, having them learn the value of data, and making sure that they're doing it in a way that everybody respects the data is really important, because that goes on to empower kids, knowing that what they're doing is important and it's not contrived. It's something that's real and important, and that changes kids' perspectives.
And I think you're doing this at the right age. And I know that some of the school systems, even in the Washington, D.C. area where I am, they're down in the elementary and in the middle schools because there seems to be such a move or dichotomy in society about, what is science and why science is so important. And I'm so glad that you're doing this with the students to teach them that if you don't have the science, you really have no idea what's going on out there. So looking at wildfires and river health, this is something that you've mentioned several times. What are we looking at here, and why is this map, this chart, so important for local citizens to understand about their own home areas?
Yeah, so all of this has been coming through the first ever river science class that we offer at the high school. So all of these kids going out and collecting this data has been part of their environmental science class or environmental club, and now it's actually into its own full river science class. But the kids also have these graduation requirements to do a capstone project where they research and they produce something. And we had our student go through and produce this story map, which uses a lot of GIS plus all the information they gathered. So we could have this story map to share with the public so that the public can start to understand the impacts of the wildfire, the impacts to the river health. And it's just it's a nice way to tie in what the kids are doing and bringing it back to the public, making sure that they're aware of it as well, and what's happening with their school and their environment.
Yeah, and the whole idea of allowing the students actually to be teaching the elders and their families, I think that's a very important link. So if you have several hundred students, you're really reaching thousands of people in a very significant way. Going back to the drones that we talked about earlier, why at this age do they understand and need to understand more about why drones are so important and how to use them? Because I would assume drones will be literally integrated into their future, correct?
Yeah, it's a technology that's quickly being implemented in river restoration and river projects and land, and it definitely isn't going anywhere. So this is a picture taken from the Van Norman project, which is a local river restoration. So we're kind of shifting out of the wildfire now and into restoration activities. And these kids are out collecting data. Then the first thing we had was doing a land survey and fly the drone so we could get some maps. And yeah, it's fun to watch kids around drones. It kind of merges kids that maybe normally wouldn't be interested in the environment or river health, but they may be on the technical side or the coding side or even the gaming side. And now we're creating a different kind of interest that bridges them over to say, hey, some of my interests could be applied for this, and there's jobs out there in the future for me. And it's wonderful to see those kids come out of their shells and get excited about other things, and then they kind of fold into the environmental side of it.
And the thing I found interesting, we didn't really talk about at the time, but you talked about the 4-day courses that you have, and they actually come out of there if they pass the exams, certifications. And that's something in today's world, more than degrees or getting a high school diploma, it's having specific certifications is critical to the future of their work and their contribution back to society. So I think you need to be given kudos for that, Luke, and allowing people to study for and have those certifications. But this is up close and very dirty. What are we doing?
Yeah, so this is the Van Norman restoration site, and before we can really go down and use this or collect water down there all the time, we first said we need to build a trail because we want to have a small footprint. So one of the first things is kind of teaching the broader stewardship of the land and saying, 20 students shouldn't just walk down this hillside 5 times over the next couple of months. That's going to start to deteriorate the hill slope. So we actually made them build a trail down there, which kind of initiates that first step. And getting these kids out and getting them to get their hands dirty is great. And they're hard workers. And they're good students.
Yeah, that's very important. Tell us what's going on here. You have some really good photos. I'm just going to kind of move through here. We're running out of time, but this is really great to end this particular show. What's happening? And I'm just going to go through some photos and you just keep chatting, okay? And we have about 1 minute left.
This one's just kids out doing land survey with RTK GPS, so really sophisticated land survey equipment, and they're learning how to map, and that's what this picture is. Kids here using a drone that we were flying earlier, actually letting them see how it operates and how it lands and takes off, and again, they just really get engaged with this one.
Yeah, it's really good to have the opportunity to touch these things.
This one is an app, a mapping app the kids built, and then they went out on the Van Norman project and were documenting any kind of habitat. So this one here shows that students found some kind of habitat, which is a den or a cave that animals are using for shelter. And then all those other orange dots are other habitat locations as well that they're identifying. Right. So it could be nests or scat.
And we're back to this manual. We're going to go out on this. I think this is very well done. Tell us why this manual is so important for people to know about, but also to follow it as far as the simplicity, the applicability, and the way to do it, very much up close, personal, and hands-on.
Yeah, so about 30 seconds. Low-tech restoration is a way that we encourage rivers to become messy again and kind of kickstart some of the processes that they need to be healthy. And we have students actively doing these restoration projects using these techniques, and they're low tech. They can be done by hand. They don't cost a lot, and we can actually see real impact. So again, I think kids be involved in seeing their work come to fruition, and that's the techniques that we're using in this class.
That's fantastic. This is Dr. Luke Javernick, Executive Director, award-winning river scientist, river science. Thank you for being with us as we create the Emerald Planet.
Thanks, Sam, for having me.